So if you can't get to it, go to your search, and it's C.
Sorry, no. We couldn't find it.
Right. So if you try doing this, go to your search, type C. You have to put in your colons. Try that and then bollocks. Let me just see. Second. Sorry? Have you got it?
Yeah.
You got it, Kieran?
Yeah.
Good. Right. So now, just to check that you can create a folder on it, just go to it and just create a folder. Call this folder. Just do that. Right click. See if new folder comes up. Does it come up?
Yeah.
Okay. Delete it. Make sure you can delete. Yeah? Okay, right now. I'm not going to be saving much to this folder because this is your kind of the most important folder on your machine, obviously enough. Okay. The only reason I'm using this one is because it's easy find. Simple as that. Okay. Now, so keep that open. All right, just minimize it. Okay, am I recording? I am recording. Okay. Now, so I'm going to go to examples. Now, so we go. So up to this, now I don't know why they don't have files on Java 1 because they're not that hard, right? Now, to create files is grand, no problem. It's no problem doing that. However, when your files are created, when you want to read from them, when you want to write to them, okay, you have to use something called streams. Now, they're not the other streams. These are file streams, okay? There's something called that. Now, there's various streams you can use to input data into a file. There's various streams. So they're all called input streams. So it might be buffered input stream. I have another one called buffered output stream, okay? Buffered input stream is for writing to a file. Buffered reader, for instance, is for reading from a file. Okay, there's all these various ones. There's around 5 or 6 that we'll be using. All right. So if you want to write to a file, you have to create a file writer object. If you want to read from a file, you have to create a file reading object. If you want to read and write from a file, you can also create a file reader writer. Okay, it's a combination of both. But before we get to that, we have to know how to create files. Now, also, before we go doing any of that, we need to know what the separator is on your machine. Now, what do you mean by the separator? So let me just show you. The easiest way to explain is to show you. So I'm going to static void ex1. Okay, so this is displaying our separator, which can be different for different machines. All right, so if I want to find out my separator, use the command. Now this is not examinable, this is just to make sure you, so java.io.file.separator. Oops, sorry. Right, now that means when I am writing file paths, you know what a file path is? I go C that way. In some systems, it can be that way. All right. So before you go doing this, you need to find out what your separator is. So my separator is, so might be different on yours. Is it the same on yours? Right.
Is that because of the how the file path is?
Sorry?
Is that because of how the file path was added? The JPK, is it?
I think so. I'm not too sure, Jason. All right. You can actually change the separator. I don't know why you don't fucking do that. But you can actually do that. I don't know why. Now, that's the separator in your system. Here's where it gets slightly complicated. Right. Start off with, this is a file object. So file, my file. Okay, now, so this is a file object. Okay, this is not the actual file, but the location of the file. Okay, so this is a file object. This is not the actual file, but the location of the file. All right, so I'm importing it. So it's important to know that even though the file type is called file, it is not a file. It is only the location of the file. That's all it is. All right, so if you have something like this, my file is equal to new file. Now, so this is the separator on your machine. All right. However, I'll just do it all here first. Okay, so my file, I am going to say C / Java test / home. Now, so the file constructor takes the string. Okay. Now, what that does is it only marks that location as where a file or a directory could exist. Okay. Now, a file, that's another thing as well. A file can be the location. So this can also be the location of a directory. Okay, so it can also be the location of a directory. So a file can be the location of a file or the location of a directory. Now, the basic question we want to ask is, does this file exist? Now, we haven't created it. And by just doing this, it doesn't create it. All right, so we need to ask the question, does this file exist? That's very easy. Does this file exist? And it's quite simply my file dot exists. This was in other, yeah, we used that not so long ago. Okay, so does this file exist? No. Okay, it does not exist. All right. Now as well here. So if you use the /, so the \, that is going to work for Windows usually. Okay. But the thing is, that won't work for Unix, as far as I know. So now, so these guys here are called separator. All right. So if you want to see another separator, if you go to your folder, click in there, see it changes. If I click on some other folder here, if you click on it, it actually gives you the file path. C users, no left OneDrive, MySQL, PHP 2018. Oh, what such fun we had with that. Remember that? Fantastic. Okay, so that is the Windows separator. If you want a platform independent separator, you should go with the /. So the upshot of it is /, which is that guy, is system independent. Okay. Now, also, this is something called an excuse me, absolute path. Now, a path is the exact address. Simple as that. This is something called an absolute path, which is the exact address of a folder or file. Now, this does not exist. Exists, returns true if the file, if a folder or file exists at this location. False if not. Okay, this will be false. Now, I want us to go to the C drive. Okay, go to the C drive, and I want you to create a folder called test. You call test. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to assign that to this file object. So I'm going to say my file is equal to new file, and we're going to say C, and I'll check the spelling. It is case sensitive. T-E-S-T. Okay, now we check, does this exist? Does this folder exist? So I go my file dot exists. True. Okay. Now inside the test folder, I want you to create a new text document. And I want you to call this one capital O-N-E .txt. Okay, so capital O lowercase ne .txt. Okay, now, so I'm going to go down here. I'm going to redefine my file. It's going to be equal to new file. It's going to be C / test and I go 1.txt. And so we go, does this file exist? And we go .exists will be true. Okay, so create this folder first, then run this code down here. So this will return this folder exists. So this will return true. And here as well, same thing. Create the file first, then run the code. And this file exists. So this will return true. Now, now these are absolute paths. And the thing about absolute paths is they can be very, very long. All right. For instance, let's just have a look, see here. So I can have, for instance, using parallel streams in my Google Drive. The address for that is users, no left, Google Drive, Java Program 2019, videos, chapter 7, 7.5, using parallel streams. That's now that's an absolute path. Okay, so, however, what is used more often than not is the relative path. Okay, now what's a relative path? Okay, so all the above are absolute. So the above are absolute file paths. Okay, now, which is the full address path. Okay, however, we can also use relative file paths. Now, relative means with regard to somewhere else. Okay, and what they, so relative to where? I'll show you relative to where. So I go here, I go system dot get property. Okay, and I type in the command all lowercase user dot dir. Now that prints off there. Now it's going to be different on yours. See users, no left, OneDrive, Java Programmer 2019-20, Workspace 2, 8.1, understanding files and directories. Okay. Now, what are relative? So that means that is my user directory for all my Java files. Okay. So as I'm creating files, they're automatically saved. They're into here. All right. Now I'll show you an example of a user directory. Just see. Source. Right. So I am going to create a file inside here. So it's just inside 8.1 understanding files and directories. I'm going to right click. I'm going to go to new, and I'm going to create a untitled text file. Okay, I'm going to file, save as, understanding files and directories, and I'm going to give it a name of test. Now I should go test.txt, so I refactor, rename, and I go test.txt. Now, where is that file? That file is inside that directory. Okay, that file is inside that directory. That is our user directory. That's where all files that you're going to be saving in Java are saved by default. Unless I say otherwise. So if you're pumping stuff off, now we're going to be creating files automatically. Unless you specify where you want to have them saved, they're going to be saved in here. Okay, now, if you know your user directory, you can have right. So that's the user directory. So this is my user directory. So, okay. My user directory is that guy. Now, rather than use all of that, so let's say if I wanted to create a file inside here, if you're using absolute paths, I'd have to do something like this. I'd have to go file, my file is equal to new file, and I'd have to put this inside here, and I have to go like this, and I'd have to say test.txt. Now, what's wrong with that? It's too long. Okay. Also, the separators are wrong. It doesn't recognize those separators, so you'd have to change the separators as well. All right. So it's long, and you will quickly find that it doesn't matter what sort of application you're using. If you're using absolute paths, your paths are going to be huge. All right. It's quite easy to get paths that run to 4 or 5 lines of code. All right. Well, that's too long. All right. So this is my user directory. So if we were using absolute paths, this is what we would need to use to create a file called test in our, user directory. Okay. Now, obviously that's way too long. So what we can do instead is, so we can use something called a relative path. So I'm going to go, my file is equal to new file. And we go, it's test.txt. Okay. Now, if you don't provide it with a path, all right, it checks inside its own user directory. Okay. So if you don't provide a path, so if you don't provide a path, this is then a relative path, which means relative to your user directory. So when you do test.txt, what you're actually doing is you're looking for that guy. All right, but you don't have to provide, because if you don't provide a address in front of your file, it'll search in there. All right, now to prove that it is, so I've already created a file. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to, so it's the file in same directory. Let me go my file dot exists, which returns true. Okay, so this returns true. As test.txt exists in the user directory, which is that guy. Which is here. All right. So now, beauty of this is your app installs on someone's machine. All right. Wherever it installs, that becomes your user directory. All right. So you only want to save within your app, then it's going to automatically save inside here. Doesn't matter where you install the app. It's going to install inside a folder inside the app. Okay. Now, so that exists. Now, if I check for a file that doesn't exist, so I create a dummy file. So I'm going to go file, dummy is equal to new file, and it's looking for one called dummy.txt. Okay. So there's no file called dummy.txt. So this file does exist, question mark. And I'm going to go dummy.exists. False. Okay, false. Now, so relative paths really are the way to go. You don't use absolute paths much at all. All right. Main reason you use relative paths is that because they're much, much shorter. Now, but you do need to get used to certain things. Now, I am going to go inside the source folder. Okay. Now, inside the source folder, the way Windows is set up, so let me see if I can just go. So just give me a second. Actually, do you know time is up to fuck? Hold on. All right. This is the folder, and com.android. Okay. Any files I put in there are inside the source folder, are inside the com folder, are inside the Android folder. There's all of our files. So what we're going to be doing tomorrow is we're going to be saving files in here, and they're going to be using relative paths rather than absolute paths. And that's us finished for today. Okay. So I will stop.